r/nosleep. Hosted by you/BrittonRT. The Records of Sam Parks, The Black Sun. It had been almost 3 weeks since we had arrived in North Germany. It had been hard to adjust at first, but many of the locals spoke at least some English, especially in the city. So that it helped with our sudden and life-altering move. The flat my mom had bought for us was even nicer than the one I had back in Tucson. At the top of one of the buildings in the old part of downtown. Not having a car and taking public transit everywhere was weird, so I started looking into what would be involved in getting a vehicle almost right away. But I guess I started to get used to it pretty quickly. It was actually fairly convenient, and Sam and I could go get drunk at any number of bars and clubs and not have to worry about driving home. My little brother I'd been tasked with keeping an eye on had also been surprisingly easy to deal with. He mostly kept to himself, just watching Twitch streamers and playing games. I'm not sure he even really noticed he was no longer in the USA. It seemed to be all the same to him. Mom had gone back to her usual self, a few terse texts once a week or so just to make sure we still existed. Usually just a couple words. The last one had just been "How's Brandon?" I replied in kind. "He's fine." She didn't bother following up. Sam and I had met a couple people. The first one had come through her online community, and he had introduced us to a few more like-minded individuals. And that is how we found ourselves heading on the bus to Elias' house. He had arranged for us to meet up with an acquaintance of his at his place, just outside of the city proper. I had to admit, the German countryside was beautiful once we were out of downtown. Far greener than Arizona, that's certain. If only it weren't for all the noise of the ambulance, it would have been perfect. This woman is scamming us. We could afford it, so I hadn't had a problem with giving it a try, but I had made no secret of my skepticism. Maybe. Sam admitted. It had been a dubious tale. Supposedly, this Emma we were meeting with could bring people into the spirit world. Some kind of psychic or something. But she was charging us for the service. It was apparently her business, which only heightened my skepticism further. Also, apparently only certain people could pass over, but of course she'd be charging us for the service whether it worked out or not. I didn't have high hopes. But Elias had sworn she could actually do it. He claimed to have been to the other side himself. We hadn't known him very long, so it was anyone's guess if he was trustworthy. His house was pretty nice though, looked like an old European style thing, 2 stories with a steeply sloped roof and a nice bit of property around it. His son and daughter were playing outside when we finished walking from the bus stop. "Hey there." They didn't seem to react to Sam, or me for that matter. It was like we weren't even there. The doorbell was rung and his wife answered. Or at least I assumed it was. I couldn't remember her name, and recall being a bit embarrassed, but Sam had my back. "Sophie, good to finally meet you." They exchanged introductions and a few pleasantries and she invited us both inside. It was rustic, definitely different than the cheap stucco houses or glass-faced condos of the Southwest. They had an old piano in the corner of the living room, where Sophie had led us. "Do you play?" I suppose Sam was just trying to make nice conversation. I'd never seen her express interest in music before. "No, it was my mother's. Sometimes the little ones poke around on it a bit, but we don't really keep it well tuned." Her English was flawless, despite her thick accent. Just like her husband. I couldn't imagine being able to speak multiple languages so well. Apparently her husband Elias spoke 3 fluently. Made me feel a little intimidated, in retrospect. "She looks a lot like you, don't you think?" Sam whispered to me when she wasn't looking. "Looks like me?" Odd thought, I certainly didn't see it at the time. Elias showed up shortly after we had found the couches. He already knew we were drinkers from the few times we had met up in the city, and he had a handful of becks for us all. It was still pretty early in the day, but they didn't seem to flinch, even with the kids around. A different culture, I suppose. I wasn't about to complain. Emma texted me, "She's on her way." In the meantime, I've been dying to ask you more about some of the things you've seen. Every time we spoke, I wanted to giggle at his North German accent. As a dumb American it sounded like something right out of a movie. I held my tongue. We regaled them with some of our tales and encounters. Eventually the kids took notice after coming back inside, and I had to be a bit more careful to make sure we stayed on a child-friendly trajectory. The young boy seemed especially interested once he realized what we were discussing. "What are your names?" Sam asked, and I realized I hadn't even thought to. The boy didn't hesitate. "Finn." Sam extended her hand and he took a quick shake. His sister seemed more reserved, hanging in the background. "She gets nervous around strangers." Her mother explained. "It's all right, Hannah, come say hello." The young girl approached, but stayed outside of arm's reach. Hi Hannah. The young girl nervously approached Sam after she said it. She couldn't have been older than 7 or 8. So is it true? Finn seemed to struggle with words for a moment. Ghosts, like you said? The boy wanted to get back on topic. I had seen him listening in for the last 10 minutes or so. I answered since Sam was predisposed. I don't know if they were ghosts, but like I said, they were some sort of shadowy people. I really had no idea how to qualify them. Dad saw ghosts. He replied. His English was a bit broken, but for his young age was impressive given how little German I knew by comparison. At this point, basically none. The doorbell rang and Elias said something I couldn't understand, which caused the kids to scurry away. Sophie got the door and there was a quick exchange between them just out of sight. Of course, I couldn't understand it either. But quickly she found her way into the common area where we had all been conversing. I was surprised when I saw her. I had been expecting some old lady, maybe with a headscarf, tarot cards, runes, or whatever the charlatans used in these parts. Emma looked like she was maybe in her early 20s. She was wearing a clean suit, and besides a modest purse, didn't seem to have anything else with her. Certainly not what I expected from a so-called psychic. And beyond that, she was absolutely gorgeous. To a degree that I actually had to be careful not to gawk. I loved Sam to death, but sometimes it is hard not to just acknowledge beauty when you see it. Fortunately, once we got to talking, it became easy enough to ignore. We had much to discuss, I'd come to discover. It started off as just some small talk between us all, but Sophie pulled her husband away about 30 minutes or so later, once we had all become properly acquainted. They spoke in unknowable whispers on a couch across the room, leaving us with this Emma. So I did some homework. Emma started. After Sam invited me to your Facebook community. She was looking at Sam in an odd way as she said it. Or was she looking at me? I think this is going to go very well, based on some of your accounts. She went on. What makes you think that? I asked. Elias and Sophie were chatting quietly in German on the sofa across the chamber, but I could tell they were both listening in. Because you've already been to the other side. I didn't really understand. But Sammy seemed to have a clue. You mean with the dog? Emma nodded. I remembered that place like I had just been there yesterday. That bizarre monster with hundreds of legs, hiding in that little house. The lonely creature was burned into my mind. I started to get a headache just thinking about it. You probably want to know how I'm so sure? Emma added. I hadn't gotten that far yet, I had just been considering asking Elias for a painkiller. Sam took the bait though. How do you know? Emma pulled out her phone and scrolled through Facebook to the bit I had typed out after our expedition in Candace's house, where I had written about my experience being transported into that strange version of the residence. She tapped a particular section. It was the part where I was describing how the darkness seemed to flow in beams through the window, as though it was light. How I could see through it, despite its apparent blackness. And the black sun from which it spilled. I forgot about my pain for a moment. You've been there? She nodded. Do you want to go back? You can do that? Sam inquired. Emma just smiled, and beckoned for Sam to come closer. Elias and Sophie continued just watching from afar. I recall feeling a bit uneasy at that moment. I wasn't actually sure I did want to go back to that place, even if it were possible. I supposed it hadn't seemed dangerous when I had first been there, but there was something intensely unsettling about it. I couldn't quite put my finger on what the feeling was though which it brought to mind. I guess in retrospect, it was almost like intimacy? Like it was a place that existed in me, in my own head. I can't explain it, but I thought of Candace again. That monster that called itself Candace, writhing in the corner of her home in the darkness. There was something so familiar about Candace. My head ached. I suppose my own curiosity was stronger than my displeasure though. I didn't say a word as I snapped out of my thoughts to find that Emma was already instructing Sam as to how this would go down. She was on her knees in front of the so-called psychic, holding both of her hands. Would have been nice for me to have been paying attention, I guess. I tried to catch up. So remember, it'll feel like you're falling into water. Don't worry, even though it'll seem like it, you won't drown. Just take a deep breath before I count to 3. Sam seemed surprisingly relaxed. I felt the sudden need to intervene, realizing that if anything this woman was saying was true, she might disappear again, into that strange place. Although it seemed unlikely, I would think someone who could make people disappear would make international news. But like the crying lady, I had seen a lot, so it was hard to know. Are you ready, Sam? She gave the affirmative. Close your eyes then. Don't forget to take a deep breath. Sam did, and Emma started counting down. There was something almost hypnotic about her voice, I'll admit. Elias and his wife continued to just watch, eagerly or otherwise. I suppose they had done this before as well. 3. Sam took another breath, for good measure. 2. 1. Nothing happened. Emma waited a moment, and then spoke. You can open your eyes. Her eyes snapped open. Oh, wow. Sam stood up and looked around. I tried to read her expression. She sort of stumbled around a bit. Hello? She was talking at nothing. Can you all hear me? Is anyone there? I can hear you just fine. I responded. Emma gave me a raised eyebrow and a bit of a smile. She can't hear you though. Then how could she hear you? When you told her to open her eyes. I retorted. I walk in both worlds. Sammy started to wander the house, and we all took to our feet to follow her. She seemed oblivious to our presence. Except for Emma, who she occasionally spoke to. What's with this dark light, anyways? She eventually asked as she approached one of the windows. Emma had something of an answer it seemed. It's the light of a reality we choose not to see, it isn't darkness. It is the light that illuminates the things we want to hide from. Our true selves. She waxed the poetic for a moment. That dark thing, it only exists in you. It was weird that nobody else seemed to really react to anything she was saying. Sam made her way outside through the back door, and just stared up at the sky for a while. She didn't appear to be looking at anything, but I knew what she was staring at. I'd seen the black sun myself. I had to say something. Emma, Sam can't hear me, you said? She affirmed. Can I go in with her? Is that possible? She pierced me with her breathtaking eyes and grinned. Give me your hands. I'm going to count down from 3. I remember the rest of her instructions from when she had given them to Sam. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes as soon as she began. 2. 1. Open your eyes. And just like that, there I was. Drowning in black puss. I gasped trying to find myself, and it took a while to realize that my lungs were clear and it had all been imagined. Perhaps? I could see Sam under the dark illumination of the cancerous black orb in the sky, radiating the antithesis of light across everything. She had done it, somehow. She had sent us both back to this place again. Sam quickly took notice of my presence. Daniel? She ran over and gave me a hug. It's incredible, isn't it? I wait here for you so often. What a strange thing to say. I couldn't help but notice that I could still see Emma, standing just where she had been, watching over us. But everyone else was gone. It essentially was the same house, as far as I could tell. From the outside at least. Even under the light of the reverse star which stripped the color from everything, it was clearly the identical location we had just been in. The same steep-roofed house, the same green yard, the same flower beds and garden. Emma? I wasn't quite sure yet what my actual question was. I had so many. Yes? Where are we? Like, what is this place really? I wish I could tell you. The best I can say, is it is the truth that lives in all of us. The dream that lies hidden when we wake. It was a far more enigmatic answer than I had been hoping for. It certainly didn't feel like a dream. She walked over to Sammy and I think we should go back now. Wait, I'm not ready. Sam protested. Don't worry, I have a feeling this won't be the last time you all find your way here. Before Sam could protest further, Emma took each of our hands, mine in her left and Sam's in her right. And before I could even react, we were back outside again, under the normal light of a normal sun. We shared dinner that evening with the Schusters. Emma stayed as well. Now that my disbelief had been dispelled, the conversations got very interesting. I wanted to know everything she knew, and she seemed to know a lot. My first time was life-changing. Elias had apparently been there many times now, according to his story. Something of my father still lives here, and thanks to Emma, I get to see him sometimes. Again, I thought of the spiderous beast. Did he still look like your father? Or like, something else? It was a rather direct and blunt question, one I could have probably worded a bit more cautiously. Fortunately, he seemed to be okay with it. No. He has changed. I wondered why that might be. And I wondered something else as well. Emma, why didn't Sam disappear when she crossed over? Images of her vanishing in Candace's house filled my mind past my head pains. She seemed a tad confused for a second. Nobody has ever disappeared. Not for me at least. Seconds later, she added, I actually was hoping you two might be able to explain that to me. I thought it might have been hyperbole, the way you wrote about it. We went on to explain everything that had happened with Candace and the whole disappearing dog incident in much greater detail. I tried my best to faithfully communicate whatever I could, and Emma seemed interested in every nuance. I couldn't help but notice at this point that Sophie had been surprisingly quiet this whole time. I'm not sure exactly what first brought it to my attention, but once I had realized it, it became more and more apparent. She seemed really uncomfortable. I guess she had the whole time. The evening wound down and we went to go catch the bus home after saying our goodbyes. It had been an interesting evening, definitely worth the small fare it had cost to get out of the city. There was a lot to think about and digest. We never made it on that bus though. As we waited for its arrival, Sophie showed up. I hadn't recognized her as she approached, but once she was close it became clear who it was. "Oh, hey, going into the city?" I asked, not really thinking too hard about it. "I need to talk to you too. Can we go somewhere private?" I wasn't sure if this was the last bus for the evening. I supposed I could check the app, but I was pretty eager to get home. Sam accepted on both of our behalf, to no surprise on my part. I didn't really get a say in it. We walked to a nice park a few blocks away and sat with Sophie on a bench. It wasn't well lit but somehow felt brighter than the odd place we'd been just earlier that day. I could tell there was distress in the woman, and apparently Sam could as well. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Are you okay?" Sophie started crying. I don't know what to do. She didn't explain though. Unsure how to proceed, I just asked a question. "About what?" "Emma. She's always there. Always watching me." I didn't really get it, but she elaborated. "She stands in the corner of the bedroom while I sleep. Elias and the children can't see her most of the time. She wiped the sweat of her eyes away." I'm sorry, I know this sounds crazy. Perhaps, but not as crazy as the world of darkness Sam and I had found ourselves in, so I was prepared to give her the time of day. "There's something else." She fiddled about in her purse for a moment before producing a bit of old paper. It was a photograph. It looked like some old instant photo from an early 80s camera. Just a simple shot of a young woman. The resemblance was striking. It was the psychic. But it looked so old. Sam had something to query. "Is this her? Is this Emma?" Just a nod, and then she was my husband's first lover, I suppose. Or was. Back when they were in university. It seemed weird that they'd still be inviting her into their home, if that were the case. She hasn't aged a day. Sam noticed. Once she said it, it was plain as day. Sam looked at me, and then at Sophie. "She died, didn't she?" It was stated as a question, yet from the expression on Sophie it didn't really need an answer. She answered anyway. "No. She's real." "What are you saying then?" "She's always there, somewhere. Watching me and the children." She paused. "I think there were children?" She continued. "Sometimes it will be from the back seat of a passing car or bus. Sometimes a window. Sometimes right in the room." She seemed scared. "Hey, it's okay. You can talk to us." I hadn't even noticed the woman was starting to tear up again until Sam had said the words. "But you were talking to her, when you invited her in. Why did you even have to invite her in?" I asked. "I talk to her all the time. It's hard to avoid her. She comes in all the time." She tried to pull herself together. "I'm sorry, I don't know what I am asking for. But, I guess, I just hoped maybe you two would know something." I wasn't sure what she was asking for either. That last bit tripped me up. Like, how to get rid of her. Is she bothering you? How to help her? She's trapped. She has to watch me. It's her job. To help her? I'm sorry, I don't really know anything about this sort of thing. I could tell she was disappointed as I spoke, but it was the truth. I hadn't the slightest clue what any of this was about. "We'll help her." Sam sounded so matter-of-fact as she said it. Just like her to offer to do something neither of us had any idea about. When we went home that night, we had committed to come back the next day. There was no plan, just some phantom hope that maybe we could figure something out. I wasn't really sure what we were even trying to do. But when I woke up the next morning, something was wrong. It took me way longer than it should have to recognize it, as I slumped into the bathroom like a zombie to shower and brush my teeth. Everything was colorless. I peeked back out of the bathroom and saw the light coming through the antique apartment's window. I wasn't surprised to see that it wasn't light, but beams of shadow, laying the whole place in permeable darkness. Somehow, I was back in that strange space again. A world under the black sun. "Sam?" I couldn't see her anywhere. "She can hear you, but you can't see her." I nearly jumped when I heard the voice. It was Emma, of course. Jesus fucking Christ, Emma. You scared the shit out of me. Just say something to her. I tried, But I couldn't. I'm not sure why. It had seemed so easy before. Go look in the closet. In your bedroom. It was an unusual request. What the hell are you doing in my apartment? Why am I here again? Everything seems so surreal. Just go look. Not really knowing what else to do, I made a face and went to my bedroom. My hand met the handle on the closet. It seemed such a petty request, and yet I had the feeling I wasn't going to like whatever she was about to show me. I opened the closet door. Nope. I closed it again immediately, and then turned back toward Emma wild-eyed. What the fuck? What the fuck did I just see? I was losing my shit. What the fuck? You know what you saw? I was pretty sure I didn't though. I did know I hated it. In fact, I was quite sure at that point I needed to stop postponing my appointment to get my head checked out. I was definitely losing my goddamn mind. I couldn't get the image out of my brain. Please, just send me back, I don't want to be here anymore. It was the only thing I cared to ask of her as I backed away from what was behind that horrific door. I can help you, Daniel. But I need your help in return. Why do I need your help? I asked. The image of what was in that closet just wouldn't go away. Really, I knew what it was, I just had trouble accepting it. It was something that I know will haunt me until the day I die. Probably soon. She's trying to get rid of me. Sophie. Sam. You. Please don't help her. She sounded genuine. And even in this black and white world, she was still breathtaking. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to help her. I'm just trying to help you. She went on. I know you're scared. But help her how? I now had two conflicting requests. I needed to know more. Why is she trying to get rid of you? Seemed a logical starting point. I had to interrupt my own question though. I'm sorry, you know what, I can't do this anymore. You have to tell me what the fuck that was I just saw. No explanation, no help. No help is all I'm asking for. She replied. Don't help her. I was about to say something else but she seemed startled all of a sudden. Sam's calling them. Goodbye. She touched me and in an instant I was back in the normal version of the apartment. Sam was already on the phone with someone, and Emma was nowhere to be seen. Yes, he's just been wandering around and talking to nobody. Based on what he's saying, he seems to be talking to someone named Emma? I don't know what he's doing. Sam, I said it softly as I approached her, and she seemed relieved. She exchanged a few brief words after she saw me. He snapped out of it I think, thank you Sophie, let me call you back in a bit. She hung up a second later and gave me a hug. Dan, you had me worried sick. What's going on, are you okay? It was Emma, you're right. She came here. She showed me something, and asked for a favor. I wasn't exactly sure how to explain it, but I tried. She asked us not to help Sophie. She doesn't want to go away. I couldn't read Sam, but the blankness she wore worried me a bit. I think we should find out more before proceeding. I went on. I wasn't sure what we were proceeding toward anyways, but I said it regardless. It's hard to know who to trust. I don't want to go away either. Daniel. What are you talking about? What was I talking about? My head was starting to throb again. I think I need to lay down. I'm scared, Sam. I wasn't sure why I said it. Maybe it was because of what I had seen in that closet. I don't know. I don't remember anything that happened after that until I woke up under a new sun, so bright it nearly burned out my eyes. After they adjusted though, I recognized it for what it was. A lamp pointed right at my face. Where was I? The masks gave it away though, as well as the hairnets. I was in some kind of hospital or emergency room. I tried to speak, but no words were produced. I could hear chattering all around me, but no meaning was found in any of it. And my head, it hurt so badly. After a while I realized the words around me were all German. No wonder I couldn't understand them. I think someone tried to talk to me, but I don't remember what they said, or if it was even in English. Eventually, it all seemed to fade again, and the color drained from the room. Everyone slowly became ephemeral, and then non-existent. But Emma was there. In her light blue nurse's smock, her smile only visible through her gaze. Where am I? I seemed to be able to find my voice again. You know where you are. I was sure I didn't. Or maybe I did? What's happening to me? Something about her threw me off. It was almost like staring into my own reflection, some phantasm of narcissism looming above me as I laid on that hospital table. I guess I did know where I was. Do you know why the sun shines black? I didn't, and wasn't sure it was the most pressing question at the time. Instead I asked what mattered to me. Where's Sam? She's here. Where? I couldn't see her. I couldn't see much. She's always with you. Do you know why the sun shines black? I guess I didn't. Why? It reveals the reality of the world. Your world. The hopelessness you feel, illuminated by the bleakness of its light. It seems so incomprehensible. I didn't feel hopeless, did I? I just want to see Sam. She's waiting for you. She's never left your side. And then the dark world turned to nothing. I awoke at some point later, alone in an inpatient room somewhere. Germany still, presumably, based on the nonsensical words I seemed to keep hearing coming from the hallway. Nonsensical for me at least. My head still hurt. I lingered there a while as nothing seemed to happen, and considered just getting up and leaving, if such a thing were possible. But a nurse or doctor came in before I had completed the thought. He walked over and seemed to check some things before noticing I was awake. He said something in German, and then corrected himself upon seeing I had no idea what he had just spoken. How do you feel? I had to be honest, I felt like shit. I could be better, feels like someone took an axe to my head. Yes, that is to be expected. I can get you some more morphine. He left shortly after. I wasn't really sure what was going on. He left as quickly as he had come. Hey love. I recognized the voice immediately. Sam. She was there next to me. Thank God you're here. What's going on? What happened to me? It'll be okay. They've got some of the best surgeons in the world. It'll be okay. For some reason she sounded like my mom in that moment. I can't explain it. But it was my mom. I was on the phone. Where had Sam gone? Everything was so confusing, and the feeling like someone was trying to crack open my skull just wouldn't go away. I desperately tried to look for Sam as the doctors, or whoever they were, administered another dose of some chemical into the little 4 bag they had left inserted into my arm. I was out like a broken light bulb. And I dreamed. A beautiful shape, vomiting and retching. Climbing out of the darkness of some forgotten mine, trying to find itself under the hopeless black sun. Walking toward the headlights of a Jeep, walking toward the only light it could see. I was the one looking into those headlights. Desperately trying to escape that dreary place. Looking for someone, anyone, who might be able to help me. To comfort me in my time of greatest need. But the Jeep drove away, leaving me alone with only shadows as my company. Every day was another loop in the hallway, the endless repetition of doctors coming and going. The same empty room repeated ad nauseum. The same nurses would leave, only to reappear. Questionable old men peeking in with questionable motives and Bibles to tell me I'd go to a better place. And every moment, a hope or dream disappeared. There one moment, then gone, only to reappear somewhere new. All the hopes I had ever had, seemed to vanish, replaced by the eternal darkness. But I couldn't give up the hope, and they had to return. They had to. I couldn't give up the idea. Maybe I could escape the black sun. Maybe I could see the light of the real sun one more time. Just one more time. I have a friend, I know that much. But I can't remember who it is. I can recall bits and pieces of it, but it is difficult. Even as I write these things, it is hard to know what was real. Perhaps very little. Sam returned though. I am thankful for that. She's the closest friend I have. Maybe my only friend? No, I think there is another one though. When my mother couldn't come see me before the surgery, he was there. By my side. I wish I had been courageous enough to tell him how I felt before all of this happened. Silly me, I had thought I had all the time in the world. Yes, it's starting to come back. Illuminated under the dreadful dark star. I had wasted half a lifetime hiding from my feelings. Half a lifetime. Maybe all of it. Sam? I asked. Yes? I'm here. I'm going to die, aren't I? I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. But I answered anyways. Probably. I'm scared, Sam. I am too. She answered. Is Daniel here? I asked hopefully. No, he left a few hours ago. But he'll be back before the surgery. I was glad to hear that. It frightened me, I didn't want to be alone. I had almost told them not to do it, but I know I have no choice. A slim chance of survival, or an assured chance of death. Sam, I said. Do you think Daniel loves me? I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The months of chemo had caused my hair to fall out and I could hardly even stand to look at myself. There was no way he could love some monster like me. I think he does. I replied. I hoped I was right. I think so too. I replied. The surgery was scheduled for tomorrow. It was why I was here, I recalled. One of the only places equipped for such an invasive procedure. I won't deny it scared the shit out of me. I pulled out my notepad and started writing again. It was time to go back with him, one more time. Back to the beginning of it all, at least as I had recorded it. At least as I imagined it. Chester mine. I had run away from myself, but this was my last chance to look myself in the eye and tell myself what I had always really been fleeing from. I am not a coward. I don't need to be ashamed of who I am. Maybe I'll die tomorrow. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll go blind, like they said I probably will. Or maybe this will all just be a bad dream in the end. It doesn't matter. Maybe those mines never existed. I know they didn't. But they helped me get through the hardest period in my life. Maybe Daniel was never really my boyfriend. I know he wasn't. But he helped me get through the hardest period in my life. In that dark place, deep in Navajo country, deep in my imagination under that black sun, is something beautiful. Maybe it even stinks of the inevitability of death. Rotting bones in a forgotten place. But it's still me. And these are my stories, for what little they may be worth. Sometimes I remember that. I am Sam fucking Parks, and I will never let the despair steal my hope. Pray for me. Tomorrow will be a difficult day. The records of Sam Parks, the return to Chester mine. I could see it up ahead. We had only been back from Germany for a short while. My mom had in fact sorted out her business in time for Christmas, as she had claimed, and the crisp winter air had taken the desert in its claws. But it was just as spectacular as I remembered it. The orange and brown mesas and plateaus flanked us as Sam drove the Jeep back to that unassuming abandoned place where it had all begun. Do you think that thing will still be there? I'm not sure why Sam kept asking. It had been nearly 2 years since we had been to the place. I don't know, I guess we're going to find out. As it had been the first time, so it was now. Just the two of us. The rest of the old crew had gone their separate ways after we had left so suddenly. We had gotten together again at one point for a drunken reunion, but they had moved on to other phases of their lives. As I guess we all had. I wasn't sure if we'd ever do anything like this again. I had finally gotten a job, one that didn't leave me dependent on my mother's dirty money. And because of it, I had finally come up with the courage to propose to Sam. I had been so happy when she enthusiastically said yes. We had talked about it and more in passing. Jokes and speculation. But I knew we both wanted to start a family, despite how we joked about it, and there wouldn't be much time for driving around looking for unusual things with a job and kids. In a sense, this would be the moment we would stop being kids ourselves, free to explore and drink and chase our fantasies to the ends of the earth, and become adults, constrained by responsibilities and commitments. The thought of it was somewhat terrifying. As was whatever was in that mine. All the memories of this place came back to me as I saw the old buildings grow larger in the distance. The dusty bunkhouse. The old crane. The glorious view from the top of the mesa. The shadows which had given us company at night, welcome or otherwise. And that beautiful thing which lurked in the bowels of the place. I had lied to Sam. I knew it was still there. That thing had never left. We pulled up into nearly the same spot we had parked last time, and started to set up camp in silence. The day was still young, even if we were now slightly older. We took our time and pretty soon we were both leaning against the Jeep, taking a quick break. Just like old times, we broke out the whiskey and each took a swig. Should we just go in? Sam asked. Did you remember to grab the old journal? I asked in reply. Yeah. And you've got your gun? Yes. Well, it was what we had come back all this way for. But still, I didn't see any reason to rush. It had been a long day. And if the last time was any indicator, it would probably come to us anyways. Let's just have a quiet evening together. Was it a good idea? Probably not. It was simply what I wanted in that moment. To spend a little more time with Sammy. And so we spent the day exploring the old buildings and reacquainting ourselves with the small but distinct outpost. Everywhere except the mine itself. And then a quick hike to the top toward the end of the day, right as the sun started to set. It was as glorious as it had been the first time. A sky burned red on the horizon, coloring the world. I held Sam close and we watched it descend as darkness began to replace it. Our own descent was tricky in the black, but we had light of our own and it carried us safely to our little home for the night. Another campfire was made, and we sat next to it together, drinking a bit more and boiling some instant noodles. What do you think happened to all the stuff we left behind last time we were here? I am not sure what made me think to ask it, it just suddenly occurred to me. Blown away maybe? Or someone else came and got it. It was a reasonable guess, and it wasn't like it mattered anyways. Daniel? She went on, pausing for a moment. Yes? I'm scared. It was a confession she didn't have to make. I think we both knew what we were confronting. It was a terrible truth, an illumination which cast darkness across both of our lives. But hers especially. I'm scared too. There would be no sleep that night. We just sat around the fire together, watching the stars, little lights in the dark. Talking about the past. And the future. Do you think our firstborn will be a boy or a girl? I don't know, Sam, but I think I'll be happy either way. She just leaned her head on my shoulder in response. There were no cameras this time. We weren't here to record or document anything. We just waited for them to appear. To come to us and say hello. Or maybe just sway awkwardly right out of sight. One by one, they did. I couldn't see them well, but I knew they were there. Shadows, watching over us. If I squinted, I could almost make them out. Almost. What do you think they want? I wondered out loud. I think they come because they pretend to care. But they're hollow, and when they have to face the truth, they retreat into the dark. I did remember them doing that. Just as I had, when I tried to escape with Sam in the Jeep the last time I had been here. Maybe we should try to talk to them? I suggested, as they hovered about us just in the periphery of my vision. They'll just run away. She responded. It wasn't something the Sam I had once known would say, but I knew she was right. More time passed, and I remembered something I had meant to give her. Just as Sam had once done, I fearlessly walked right between two of the shadows and over to the Jeep, retrieving a little object. I made my way back to her, the dark figures evacuating a slight distance in my wake. It was offered to her. A strange object. But sentimental to her, I knew. Sticks and teeth bound with string, I remember that was how she described it. Why did you bring it? She asked as she took it in hand. I don't know, it just felt connected to this place. It seemed important when you found it, after all. Sam set it aside and kissed me. Daniel, let's go make that baby. And so we set about trying to do exactly that. I wasn't sure if the shadows were still lurking about the camp. I figured they probably were. They always came and went as they pleased, pretending to be there but really just hanging around the edges. Hiding from something far more uncomfortable than themselves. I wouldn't make that mistake. I'd be there, in the tent with Sam when she needed me most. Hiding beneath our sleeping bags and the extra blankets we had been smart enough to pack, we made our brief but passionate romance. It was like a simple kiss in a way, but with all the hope and love I had ever dreamed. Perhaps it was just a dream. But it was my hope. My love. My dream. When we finally emerged after our figurative and literal intercourse of spirit and body, we found the shadows had retreated back a bit further. They were nowhere to be found at first, at least not directly around the camp. But they still lingered about the old buildings nearby. Our lights revealed them, whether they liked it or not. We drank a few beers together and talked a bit more. I guess it's about time then, Sam said. I knew it was, but I felt a sudden dread. I didn't want her to go in there. I knew it was inevitable. I knew it, but I just didn't want it. I knew she was scared, even beyond her vocal admittance. I knew she was more frightened than words could describe. I could see it in her eyes. We'll go in together. I had no intention of leaving her alone, wandering that dark and terrifying mineshaft. Facing that creature which lived within it. They won't let you. I have to do this alone. I hated it. I hated it. I hated it so much, those words. That idea. But she was right, there was no way I could accompany her on this journey. This one belonged to her. It happened so fast, I guess I wasn't really. And that was it. That was where Sam's writings ended. I don't know how many times I read and reread it. It was quite possibly the most painful thing I had ever done, taking it all in. Even in the several times I've been through it all now, I keep finding more things I hadn't noticed. Analogies and figurative descriptions. The puzzle of her feelings, assembled in words. When I had first found out about her diagnosis, I had been as shocked as anyone. It was so sudden. I had thought we had more time. They had said it was likely inoperable, so they tried chemotherapy before doing anything more dramatic. I had seen the toll it had taken on her as she was doused with the radiation, pouring out from that little black circle at the end of the device they would position over her head every week. Trying to purge the reality of her condition from her, but in fact just making it more apparent. A dark light which revealed the truth of her seemingly hopeless situation. It didn't work. It didn't go into remission. That bleakness in her kept growing. They tried increasing the number of sessions. They tried cocktails of drugs I can't even pronounce the names of, including some experimental ones. Some executive, Helen Northbrook I think, even came personally to visit her on behalf of Pfizer, touting some treatment she hoped might save the girl. But even after some small initial successes, nothing worked in the end it seemed. Nothing. I spent as much time as I could with her in the hospital, and also went to visit her mom too when I could. Candace wasn't in good shape either. She lived alone, and I think the reality of what was happening to her daughter was starting to crack her as well. She had started looking into all kinds of weird alternative medicines and fringe crackpot therapies and treatments. Quantum healing, past life regressions, even just prayers. I tried to visit her often. I knew she was alone now, with nothing but her dog for company. I helped clean the place up, picking books off the floor and removing spider webs from the corners. She often misplaced things, unable to remember where she had put them. I tried to find them for her. The months seemed to drag on. I know it was hard on Sam. Everything was on repeat. The same hospital room, looped over and over, day after day. Nurses and doctors peeking in on her, administering medicine and taking readings of God knows what. But rarely saying much except for incomprehensible babble about medicines or procedures. People would sometimes come and go. Old relatives, or supposed friends. Most of them didn't stick around long. They made an appearance, but as soon as the uncomfortable truth of just how bad Sam's condition really was became too much, they retreated like shadows into the night, rarely heard from again. And even worse, her vision was starting to fade. The tumors were apparently invading her visual cortex. She had told me that nothing scared her more than going blind, but it seemed nearly inevitable. I remember her describing how even I just looked like a phantom to her now, a dark silhouette. Indistinct. Everyone did, apparently. Eventually it was inevitable. Sam was dying, and as invasive as it was, there was only one option left. Surgery. And it sounded horrifying. A nearly 9-hour ordeal. They would remove the top of her skull and lift her brain up using tongs or some such, in order to get access to its underside. And then they'd try and excise the cancer where they could. The worst thing was that she'd have to be awake for it. It was such a dangerous procedure that they needed her direct feedback if anything felt wrong during the process. I guess to make sure they weren't cutting the wrong things. How could anything not feel wrong about any of that? I had done some research into Dr. Jenkins. He'd done it before, but it was a rare operation. He was almost a butcher in my eyes, with only a 20% success rate in this particular surgery. But that was apparently better than anyone else who did it. Sam said that she'd been warned just how treacherous this all was. She was so brave, I couldn't imagine being told the things she had been. They had her at 30% odds of surviving the operation at best, and even that didn't guarantee the cancer would go away. Beyond that, even if she survived, there was almost a 100% chance she'd go completely blind. And other forms of unpredictable brain damage were not only possible but likely. The operation would happen in Germany, in one of the few hospitals in the world equipped for such an obscure and terrible thing. I flew out with her. I did my best to be there for her. Even when her mom Candace would call, crying on the phone, pleading with Sam to run away from the doctors and just try this or that insane supposedly natural or magical cure, I had to remind myself and her that Dr. Jenkins might be her only hope, even if he was cutting her up. She begged us to run though, and I tried my best to keep her from discouraging Sam. It hadn't been cheap to follow her to Germany. A nice man was kind enough to host me as I couldn't really afford to stay at a hotel for the several weeks I'd be there. Elias and his kids weren't just supportive, but outright helpful, showing up at times to translate or assist in cases where the doctors and nurses were predisposed. Most of Sam's time was spent writing in her journal. I wasn't sure what she was writing at the time. I tried to ask, but she seemed embarrassed by it and wouldn't let me look. I wouldn't understand why until later. As the date of the surgery approached, I could see her mood and mind deteriorating. It was the saddest thing I had ever experienced, watching her fall apart. I held her hand often, and could feel her trembling as she clutched the old doll from her childhood. She had lost it years ago, and eventually found it in a dark corner under her father's abandoned desk at Candace's house. A weird thing, just wood tied together with string or twine, an unusual toothy grin on it. And speaking of her father, we did eventually hear from him. After almost 15 years of not speaking to Sam or Candace, he finally dared to show his face again. Or at least his voice. He called Sam a few days before the surgery. And he apologized for abandoning her. I thought it was disgusting. An artificial last-minute gesture from a plastic man. But apparently, he had paid for the entire expensive surgery out of pocket. I hadn't even thought about where the money for all this was coming from. I didn't know hardly anything about Candace's ex-husband, I had realized. The days ticked by agonizingly. I couldn't stop thinking about the things I wanted to say. That I had always wanted to say. I felt like my opportunity to speak them was rapidly vanishing, as Sam began to vanish herself. I had never admitted my feelings for her, even though we'd been close friends for so long. I'm not religious, but I prayed to whatever gods might listen to save her. I don't think I had ever prayed before. The hour of the operation had nearly arrived. I could tell she was so frightened. Even I was. We spoke briefly one last time before she went in. I don't recall the exact words, but it went something like this. "I'm coming in with you." I said it out loud. I wanted the nurses to hear. "You know they won't let you. I have to do this alone." Sam replied. I knew she was right. But I couldn't let her go in there alone, could I? I hated it. I hated it so much. I could see her shaking, even though she tried to hide it. "Sam, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Dr. Jenkins knows what he's doing. He's done this successfully before." I wasn't sure I believed she'd be okay, but I had to try too. I held her hand in silence for a short while. I could hear the hospital staff accumulating outside the bland room we found ourselves in. They would come for her any moment. "Daniel?" I could tell she was trying to hold back tears. I started to respond, but she went on. If I survive this, somehow." She hesitated, and then went on, actually starting to weep openly. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize, what is it?" I knew the nurses would be stealing her away in mere minutes. "I can't. I don't have any hair. I'm ugly." I couldn't stand her crying, or her words. It was a stupid idea. "Sam, just tell me what's on your mind." More silence, like the world was held in suspension. "I just want you to know I love you. I never really told you that. I will never forget the feeling of my sinking heart." "Sam." "Really?" She went on. "Not just as a friend. If I make it through this, would you take me out on a date? Maybe we could go hiking when we get back home or something." I had spent so long unwilling to admit to her or even sometimes myself how I had really felt about her. I guess it wasn't some great secret in the end, but more of an unspoken truth between us. We were both geeky and rather antisocial types, but we had always had each other. Even when our other friends or even our families had come and gone, Sam and I had always been together. In our own way. There was only one answer to be given. "Of course." I did my best to smile, and she smiled back. "I'm holding you to it," she added. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The door opened and the handful of nurses filed in to cart her away. The time had come. But there was still one thing left to be done. "Sam." She just looked at me expectantly. I didn't know what I intended to say or do exactly in that moment until I did it. I don't think there was anything I could have said which would have mattered more. I didn't care that she had lost all her hair. I didn't care that she spent most of her time vomiting and retching. I didn't care that she could barely walk, shambling the few times she got up to use the restroom. I didn't care about any of that. I loved Sam, and even in her barely stable dying form, hardly even able to hold down water without puking it out, she was still beautiful to me. A beautiful shape, even in the darkness. So I kissed her. It was quick. There wasn't much time. And like that, she was gone. Taken to face her final trial, alone. But I'll remember the smile on her face for the rest of my life as she looked back at me. "Samantha." It wasn't until after she was gone that I had noticed her journal sitting on the little plastic table next to where her bed had been. She had been so hesitant to show it to me. She would be in surgery nearly all day though, so I had some time. I wasn't sure if it was the right choice, but in my selfishness, I picked it up and started reading. It took a few hours to get through the handful of strange stories she had crafted. There were still more hours of waiting to go. So I read them again. It was unmistakable. Each time I consumed the writings, I increasingly could see through the mystique and to the true meanings of the stories she was telling. The hollow people who had hovered about her as she slept, only to retreat when the going got tough. The unending parade of monotony which consumed her every waking moment in the bleak and endless hospital rooms. The slow descent of Candace into apathy and madness, the conversations with her crying mother about the nature of her inevitable treatment as she tried to convince Sam to take another path. The absence and sudden re-emergence of her father in her life. How she had seemed to beat back the invaders in her body for a few brief moments, the medical weaponry provided by Helen and Pfizer almost working to kill the cancer which pursued her. Almost. It was all there. In its own way. But most strikingly, so was I. In all of it. Every story was told from my perspective. And in her stories, we were together. Not just friends, but a team. Lovers even. I don't know how long I cried while I read it all. I think it was a long time. And I was still crying when I got the news. The only thing I could have heard that could have broken my heart more than what I had just read. It took some time to process. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. I just looked down at the journal as it was spoken. They might as well have been speaking a foreign language. Or maybe they were? I was in Germany after all. No, I understood what the doctor was saying though. Sam was gone. After nearly 8 hours, the complications had become too great and she had died. She was dead. Sam was dead. I may well have been crying before, but I don't think I'd ever cried so hard in my entire life. Not like I did after being told. Even after getting back to the US, I still found it hard to control my grief. Everything felt like a dream. I spent so many hours reading those stories she had written over and over, imagining that they had been real. So much time had been wasted because we were both too afraid to tell each other the truth, but those stories told the truth. What might have been, if we hadn't hidden from each other? A world full of adventure, love, and color. Instead, we had chosen the hell of a black sun. And now it was too late. The mind can be a dark place, but deep in my imagination under that black star is something beautiful. Maybe it even stinks of the inevitability of death. Lost opportunities in a forgotten past. But they still belong to me. And these are the stories of the person I loved so much, for what little they may be worth. Sam never got to finish this last one. So I'm finishing it for her. It was time. I wasn't thrilled, but I knew Sam had to go into that dark pit. Are you sure you don't want me to come? I was still uncertain about all of this. I could tell she was as well, but she had clearly made up her mind. I have to go alone. So I watched and waited as the love of my life slowly disappeared into the entrance of that mine. Few of the shadows remained or cared, they simply hung around the periphery as she entered. Time passed slowly. I couldn't help but think of her. How was she doing in there? Was she okay? I had to trust her. It would all work out, right? I pulled out the old journal we had found in the mining foreman's office 2 years back and started reading it. I guess I had never really looked at it much, beyond the few records in it Sam had spoken to me back when we had first discovered the thing. Most of it was just random thoughts, scribbled inanely to record the daily insanity of a life which had been led by a person. But toward the end, the stories became more interesting. More imaginative. Maybe somehow, more real. In their own manner. I read it several times. I tried to understand their meaning. I had some clues, but every time I read them again, I found more things I had missed. Subtle hints which helped me see through the eyes of this other person. To better know what they thought and felt. Their hopes and fears. Sam was struggling. I somehow knew it. How could I have let her go in there alone? What had I been thinking? I had seen how scared she was. I closed the book. I couldn't leave Sam in that place by herself. She needed me. The shadows parted as I made my way toward the mine, retreating from me as they had from Sam. I could feel the cold heat of the black sun pouring down on me from above as I stood for a moment in the darkness which emanated from that mine. It was blacker than the dark star itself, hovering above me in the sky. The very essence of my terrors and hopelessness. But Sam was in there. And so I went in as well. I didn't know what hell might await me, but I knew I had to find her. The tunnel was just as I remembered it, long, straight, and consistent. At least until I nearly tripped over the old rails which suddenly surfaced a bit down the corridor. Before long, I was at the cave-in, the spot Sam had so enthusiastically blasted open those years back. It wasn't hard to slip through. For some reason, I hadn't brought a light. I didn't seem to need it, the colorless black was self-illuminating. I went on. A split, the same branch we had encountered before. We had taken the left path first back then, but I knew which way Sam had gone this time. Onward toward that same hole full of bones. I went straight for the descending route, making my way ever closer to her. I could almost feel her presence. I could also feel the shadows watching me. Trailing me, but staying out of sight. I wanted to scream at them to just fuck off if they weren't going to be of any help. Their superficial presence was more insulting and painful than it was worth. I knew they had never really cared, they were just shallow words and empty gestures. I held my tongue once again though and continued. Down. Down into the abyss I went. Sam? I asked for her, and my voice simply bounced around down the steep hall. Sammy? It took some time to make it all the way to the small hole at the bottom where they had broken into the natural cave network. I knew Sam awaited me, so I didn't hesitate and slipped in. I wasn't afraid. Sam had shown me the meaning of courage. I wouldn't let her down. The place was even darker than the mine somehow. I swear I could see the black sun shining even in this buried space. Its dark beams penetrating the very stone itself, raining on me like all the soil above was nothing at all. Sam? No response. I looked around, wondering where I should go next, but I knew deep in my heart where she had gone. And so I went too. Down into that next hole in the corner of the primordial chamber. It was just a short drop. And then a nauseating crawl through that winding path, barely large enough to squeeze through at points. Just as I remembered it. Sam? Can you hear me? Still no response. I crawled on. I would find her, no matter what. It was a surprisingly long little tunnel, but after a while, it opened up a bit. I was able to walk, albeit in a crouch. A bit further still, and it turned into a chamber of some sort. It must have been the place Sam had told me about, because I could see the bones scattered about the room. It was hard to say how many people they might have belonged to, but it might have just been one. Sam? I called out hopefully. There was nobody else in the room though, I was sure. I inspected the bones further. I found the skull of whoever this person was who had died in this abyssal tomb. It was striking, because the top of it had been cut off, like someone had been trying to access the person's brain, for God knows what reason. It gave me a bad taste in my mouth, and I put it down. Sam, where are you? And then I heard her. She was throwing up, just behind me. I knew it was her. I knew it. I slowly turned my head and saw a strange and pretty shape behind me. She tore at my heart in unnatural ways, perhaps at angles or in spaces I didn't really understand. She was indeed beautiful though. Sam. It's okay. You're going to be okay. I went over to her. I knew she wasn't. I don't feel well. It was the only word she could manage between vomits. The darkness consumed everything around her, nearly drowning me in it. I felt like I was at the bottom of the world. And worse still, I felt helpless. We're going to get you out of here. I tried to go to her, but she just retched again. I don't think I can. She was able to get a few words out. Sam, this won't be the end of you. There is light at the end of the tunnel, we just have to go back up to it. Together. We'll find it together. I still owe you a date, remember? I was begging, pleading. I couldn't leave her down in this hell alone. Please Sam. Let's go home. She was on her knees, vomiting, the black sun drizzling the beams of its horrible light on her head, trying to burn the disease which consumed her brain. Every moment of it seemed to make her sicker and sicker. I could see her hair starting to fall out. Sam. I didn't know what else to say. I didn't know what to do. I felt completely helpless in the face of this eldritch horror, this unspeakable atrocity which was attacking and destroying the woman I loved so dearly. It came to me in a moment, the realization that I had to fight back. Maybe I couldn't stop it. Maybe it was pointless. But it wasn't hopeless. Even as I watched her crying, dying from something I didn't really understand, I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to give in to my despair. I am Danielle fucking Atkins, and I will never let the despair steal my hope. We're leaving. I grabbed Sam by the hand and practically dragged her through that narrow tunnel. She continued to vomit as we made our way. It seemed like forever, and she smelled of her own discharge by the time I helped her climb out of that hole. But it didn't matter, we had made it that far, we'd make it the rest of the way too. And we did, after some time. The shadows watched us as we emerged from the mine. I could see them clearly now, under the light of the sun. Not a black sun, but gold and glorious. The desert glowed beneath it. Sam was still heaving, but she seemed to be recovering somewhat. Let's go get you some water. We did exactly that, and she chugged it like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. The shadowy people still dwelled around us, watching but not interfering. They would always back away from Sam when we got too close. Why did you let me go in there alone? She started sobbing. I didn't know how to reply. I'm sorry, it was a mistake. I don't know why, I thought I had to. I was so afraid. I couldn't stand the tears she drizzled as she said it. How had I been so careless? Just sitting around reading a journal while she was suffering in that black hole. I did my best to comfort her, holding her close. I was so fortunate. I had almost not had the nerve to ask her out all those years ago, despite having been friends for so much longer. I had literally flipped a coin one day. Heads, do it, tails, no. It had been heads. And we'd been together for years after. Imagine if it had been tails. I would never leave her alone again. At least not as long as she wanted my company. And certainly not when she needed me. Sam? She was gasping, but had recuperated quite a bit. She looked at me expectantly. You still owe me that date. I still don't feel well. She replied. Let's get some rest, and when you're feeling a bit better, maybe we'll go find a place to get some food and a few drinks. Yeah. That sounds nice. I let her sleep for a while in the tent as I held her. I think she must have slept for 12 hours or more, but I never let go of her. When she finally woke up, we went and found those drinks at a little Tex-Mex joint in the small town up the road about 30 miles. Almost like nothing had happened at all, Sam was already on her phone as we waited for our food to arrive. I knew exactly what she was doing. It didn't take an Einstein to figure it out. "Hey, I think I found something interesting," she said. I don't know how she was already on her second margarita after all that she'd just been through. Maybe it was because of what she had been through. "On your online group?" "Yeah, check this out." She handed me the phone.